Glacier National Park's Logan Pass is the home to some great trails, like the 3-mile one to Hidden Lake. But my favorite is the Highline, which is carved into the garden wall, to Granite Park. Then we go up and over the Continental Divide on the Swiftcurrent Pass Trail, and take the switchbacks down to a beautiful valley floor, before we get to our destination at the Swiftcurrent Motor Inn. In this video, you'll hike along with me along the entire 15 miles. It begins just across the road from the Logan Pass sign. If you're in good shape, you can take it over 15 miles all the way to Mini Glacier. But if that's too much for you, there are options. You can take it just 11.8 miles down to the Loop on the Sun Road. Or you can take it for just over 2 miles to a place I call my lunch spot. This short option has spectacular views, and because it's out and back, you don't have to arrange for transportation back to Logan Pass. I do at least one of these variations every single time I'm in the park. These days, parking at the pass is usually full by, just after sunrise. Even in October, I got there about 7:30 in the morning, and I was lucky enough to nab one of the last 3 parking spots. So if you're going to do this one, you might want to book a red bus tour a couple of months in advance, or be prepared to wait in line for a hiker shuttle. In this segment, I'm going to take you all the way down to Mini Glacier. We'll traverse the famous shelf, walk along the garden wall, and take a break at my lunch spot, where we'll meet some goats. We'll climb up the Haystack and endure a spur trail and the horribly steep trudge up to the Glacier overlook, before resting at the halfway point, which is Granite Park Chalet. Then we'll cross the Continental Divide over Swiftcurrent Pass and hike down 2,300 feet, past several lakes and Red Rock Falls, to our journey's end at the Swiftcurrent Motor Inn. This segment includes images from several of my hikes. A signpost at the trailhead reminds us that this is bear country. There are more than 500 grizzlies in the park, and as the sign says, there is no guarantee of your safety. As recently as 2019, a man went missing on this trail. But anyway, here's some advice: don't hike alone. As we descend a couple hundred feet on this easy slope, allow me to provide some trail difficulty info. A walk to my lunch spot is pretty easy, without a lot of up and down. The walk back up this slope is probably the hardest part. The hike down to the Loop includes over 1,000 feet of up and over 3,000 feet of going down. And going down can be quite hard on your knees, especially if you're not using hiking poles. You need to add about 1,000 feet of up and down if you decide to take the extra climb to the overlook. The hike to Mini Glacier has about the same amount of up and down as the Loop Trail, with a few more miles of flat hiking. This is the shelf. It was blasted into the several thousand-foot high garden wall. It's so narrow that you have to stop to let other hikers pass. It can be scary for some, but there is a handy garden hose-covered safety cable to hang on to. At least there is during the busy season. On this early October morning, it had already been stowed for the season. A little later in the morning, there is more sun on the trail and in the valley. And early on, the Sun Road is still within earshot. The cliff face is massive, but it's not until you get off the shelf and look back that you see just how big it is. But it's the view across the valley where you're most likely going to be looking. After just a few minutes, you're off the cliff face, and the trail opens up a bit. Bears aren't the only wildlife feeding here. Bighorn sheep do too. Across the valley, the 492-foot Bird Woman Falls comes into view. The trail cuts across the safety of a scree field. Then you're back in the trees where bear precautions are necessary. Some wear bells on their boots to let bears know that they're coming. But most rangers say they're not loud enough. Hey, bear. Talking, singing, and generally making noise is deemed the best way to let a bear know that you're coming, and then they usually get out of the way. Some of the smaller creatures in the park may come out in hopes that you'll toss them a crumb or two, but don't. It's best to keep wild animals wild. The trail continues along the garden wall, and by now, you can no longer hear the traffic. It's only natural to spend most of your time looking down the trail. But the view up is also impressive. This is a place where you're truly surrounded by the magnificence of Mother Nature. At this point, we're only about an hour out from Logan Pass. It's been a pretty easy stroll. And if you're not going the whole way, remember you can turn around at any point. You never know what you're going to see on the Highline Trail. Here, a mountain goat family grazes next to the trail. These goats may seem cute and docile, and most of the time they are. Like all wild animals, they are unpredictable, and it's best to keep your distance. This part of the trail is pretty flat and open, with fantastic views of the mountains on the other side of the valley. At a little over the 2-mile point, there's another grove of trees, beyond which there's a right turn onto another shelf that's been carved into the cliff face. This is my lunch spot. And if you don't have the time or the energy to do an entire trail, this is a great turnaround point. I call it my lunch spot because there are shelves carved into the cliff face. They make an excellent picnic spot. Even if you're continuing on, they're a great place to take in the McDonald Valley while resting up for the 275-foot climb up to the Haystack. This is also a great place to interact with other trail users. Most are friendly, but some will insist that you get out of their way. When you see hikers heading the opposite way, it's a good idea to ask them if they've seen anything interesting. One time, a couple told me there were bighorn sheep grazing in the clearing just a few hundred yards down the trail. Bighorn sheep are the symbol of the park, and it's a treat to see just one. And sometimes you're lucky enough to see several of them doing what bighorn do. The open space and lush grass attract grazers, as well as their predators. On another hike, I nearly captured a grizzly hunting a mountain goat. It was a mama and her 2 cubs were nearby. Grazers think it's safer to be on rocky ledges, but seconds before I shot this video, this bear was chasing a goat. Bears are omnivores. That means they'll eat just about anything. They also can be territorial. This mama bear has cubs, and when she finds an area with plenty of berries, she'll defend it for her family. Luckily, these bears were about 1,000 feet above the trail, but they can run at 35 miles an hour, and I was glad it didn't start heading my way, because you need to remember that you're miles from the nearest road and hours away from any medical help. I was happy to see that they didn't come any closer. Luckily, this bear was just checking us out. The climb to the Haystack is up a 275-foot switchback. It only takes a few minutes to climb it. There's a little saddle up here, with a great view of the McDonald Valley. The ground is littered with rocks. Some of them are quite large. It's pretty close to the Continental Divide. The rocks either rolled down, but more than likely they were dropped by a glacier. This is a long hike, and except for the first time I did it, well, I didn't shoot any video on this part of the trail. So I'm going to have to go to Google Earth, as the trail follows the contours of the garden wall. For about the next 3 miles, the views are pretty much like this. Stunning. And there is evidence of past forest fires. For about the next 3 miles, we're paralleling the Continental Divide. Trees become more plentiful as we near the halfway point. After the trail takes a turn, there's a welcome sight in the distance. That's Granite Park. It's our halfway point. This signpost is a spur trail to the Grinnell Glacier Overlook. It's almost a mile long and goes up almost 1,000 feet. I went up there the time I did the shorter loop version of this trail. The slog up was brutal for me, but I made it, and I was able to peek over the Continental Divide to Grinnell Glacier. I quickly went back down, and I was quite happy to rest for a while at Granite Chalet. Weirdly, you can buy snacks here, and they're not even overpriced. These buildings were built in 1914 and 15 by the Great Northern Railroad as a lodging site for their customers. You can still stay up here, though reservations are quite hard to get, and they're very basic. You even have to bring your own bedding. But I'm told the nights up here are close to magical. You'll have the opportunity to talk to several of your fellow hikers here, perhaps about how they're going to get back to their cars if they're only taking a one-way trip. After a brief respite, it's time to leave the Highline Trail and head over Swiftcurrent Pass. A few trails meet here, so read the signs to make sure you don't take the wrong one, so you don't end up at the Swiftcurrent Overlook. A chalet stay makes these viewpoint hikes much easier. The trail up to the pass is a bit rockier than I remembered. It also has about 500 to 600 feet of up that I forgot about. It's just the kind of place where you might see bighorn. And I did. After about 3/4 of a mile, I'm at the highest point of the day. It's about 7,200 feet at the pass, and I was feeling it. From here, the trail drops 2,300 feet, most of it in the first 2 miles. If you're new to hiking, you may be surprised to learn that going downhill is harder on the joints. I'll use some of the old footage to illustrate. That was very close, hurt my right knee. It was steep, rocky, and perhaps due to my painful knee, I was in need of a, psychological boost. Well, that's what I came to see. This view. And I was tired. Didn't expect that last bit of up, 500 feet or so up. But the view is beginning to be there, and I can't wait to get a little further down the road. Feeling better, heart rate's getting back down to 125. Nice cool breeze in my back. Sunny, it's a good day. After 9 miles, I'm coming up to the view I've come to see. It's amazing. I'm at over 7,000 feet, looking 2,000 feet down a valley that was carved by a glacier 12,000 years ago, leaving a chain of beautiful lakes. In addition, I can faintly hear the sound of 3,000-foot waterfalls. This is a special place. There is no other way to see this. You have to hike here. You'll have to endure exhaustion, blisters, and pain, while hauling yourself, your sustenance, and your cameras for 8 hours to see this. They say that you appreciate things more when you earn them, and they're right. After crossing yet another shelf, you're close to the falls. If anything, the view only gets better. It's a magnificent
The falls begin at a melting glacier. This trickle will soon join others, forming the Swiftcurrent River.
I've done this part of the trail twice, and I wish I had more pics. Both times I was simply too distracted by the valley. This trail, like other alpine trails, are only open a few months a year, because the rest of the time they're covered in snow. This was shot in mid-July, and it was almost impassable. When I came around the corner, I saw this guy resting in the shade of the cliff. His buddies went up to the lookout. Knowing your limits is important out here. Several wide-eyed minutes later, I'm on the valley floor. I look back and realize that this meltwater is just starting a journey that will end in the Arctic Ocean. And by the way, it's important to learn the types of scat. That was dried bear scat. The first suspension bridge means that there's 4 miles to go. And yes, this part of the trail is the same one we were on earlier when we went to Bullhead Lake. And yes, this is the lake. As I've been here many times before, I'm not stopping as often to shoot pictures. Frankly, I was tired and sore, so I did the last 3 miles in less than an hour, including a stop to Red Rock Falls. It's just a short walk off the main trail, and it means I'm only 1.8 miles from the end. While it would be nice to stay and appreciate it, I do so only briefly. It's been a long day, and I'm much more interested in basking in the luxury of a sparse, TV-less room with my boots off. Several minutes later, 8 hours after starting out, and carrying a lifetime of memories with me, that's what I did. You may be wondering how I got back to my car at Logan Pass. Well, I prepaid for a red bus ride for the next morning. And yes, I could have done that today or taken my chances with a hiker shuttle, but I decided to drive up. But I got lucky. It turns out that while waiting for a table at the diner, I ran into the guy who was waiting on the trail. And after his buddies showed me the pictures they took at Swiftcurrent Lookout, we started talking about getting back to the pass. And it turns out they had pre-planned. They had staged one of their cars here at the Motor Inn. And they were kind enough to let me bum a ride back to Logan Pass. And to pass it forward, I donated my red bus ticket to someone else who needed to get to Logan Pass in the morning.